The bar was already half full when Lena started her evening shift. It was a small place, dimly lit with yellow bulbs that hung low over the counter. The sound of soft music mixed with chatter and the clinking of glasses. She had been working there for nearly 2 years, ever since she dropped out of college to help her younger brother pay his school fees. It wasn't her dream job, but she liked it. She liked watching people, how they came in tired, sometimes sad, and left a little lighter after a drink and a kind word. That night, around 7:30, a man walked in who didn't look like he belonged there. He was older, maybe late 70s, wearing a neat gray suit and a hat that seemed a little too formal for the place. His shoes were polished, his posture straight, and his face calm but tired. Lena noticed how he paused for a moment at the door, looking around like he was searching for someone or something familiar. When no one waved him over, he quietly walked to the bar and took a seat. "Evening," Lena greeted with her usual warm tone. "What can I get you?" He smiled softly, his eyes gentle but distant. "Just a glass of whiskey, neat." "Nothing fancy." Lena nodded and poured him a drink. As she set the glass down, she couldn't help but notice how carefully he handled it, like he was holding something fragile. He took a small sip and let out a deep sigh. For a few minutes, he said nothing. He just looked around, watching the room the way people do when they want to feel a part of something but don't quite know how. After a while, his phone buzzed. He looked down, frowning at the screen. Then slowly he lifted it to his ear. "Yes, this is Harold Hargrove speaking," he said politely. His voice was calm but uncertain. Lena wasn't really listening until she heard a few words that caught her attention. "Yes, I understand. My account is frozen?" "That can't be right," he said, his tone rising just a little. "You need me to verify my information? Right now?" Lena had heard enough similar calls while working at the bar. Customers complaining about banks, arguing with customer service. But something about his tone made her uneasy. The man on the other end seemed to be talking fast. Harold kept repeating information, his address, part of his card number, and Lena felt a small alarm go off in her head. She took a few steps closer, pretending to wipe the counter. "Sir, sorry to interrupt," she said softly when he covered the phone for a second. "Is that your bank on the line?" He nodded quickly, still looking flustered. "Yes, they said someone tried to hack into my account. They need me to transfer my funds to a secure account before it's compromised." Lena blinked. Her stomach dropped. She had heard about scams like this before. A fake banker calling an older person pretending to help but really stealing their savings. She felt her heart speed up. "Sir," she said gently but firmly, "I don't think that's your real bank. They don't ask you to transfer money over the phone. Can I see the number that called you?" He hesitated, looking confused. "They sounded very professional. They even knew the last digits of my account." "Scammers can get that info," Lena said, trying not to sound alarmed. "Please hang up for a second. Just humor me, okay?" Harold looked torn, glancing at his phone, then back at her. The voice on the other end kept talking, urging him to act quickly. Finally, Lena reached out a hand, not touching the phone but gesturing for him to pause. "Sir, please, trust me. Just end the call and let me look up the real number for your bank." He swallowed hard. Then, after a tense moment, he pressed the red button and set the phone down on the counter. For a few seconds, they both stood there, the sounds of the bar fading into the background. Lena grabbed her phone, quickly searching for the bank's official helpline. She dialed and handed it to him. When the real bank representative came on the line, Harold explained what had happened. The woman on the phone confirmed immediately. The call he had received was a scam. If he had followed through, he could have lost everything. When he hung up, his hand trembled slightly. He looked at Lena with wide, watery eyes. "I could have lost all of it," he whispered. "It happens to a lot of people," Lena said softly. "You were lucky, and you handled it well." He gave a weak laugh. "I didn't handle anything." "You did," Lena smiled gently. "I just paid attention, that's all." He sat there for a while longer, staring at his drink, but not really drinking it. The lines on his face seemed deeper now, but so did the kindness in his eyes. "You remind me of my granddaughter," he said after a pause. "She was always watching out for people, too. Gone too soon, though. Car accident a few years ago." Lena felt a pang in her chest. "I'm sorry to hear that," he nodded slowly. "It's all right. Life gives and takes. You learn to keep walking." They spoke quietly for a while after that. Harold told her he used to own a small business, now retired. He lived alone since his wife passed away. He didn't go out much anymore, but sometimes he stopped by new places just to feel less lonely. "I'm glad you came here tonight," Lena said, "even if it was for a not-so-great reason." He chuckled. "I suppose I was meant to. Otherwise I'd be broke and miserable by now." Lena laughed softly. "Well, I'm glad to have saved you from that fate." When his drink was done, Harold stood up, adjusting his coat. "You've done more than that. You reminded me there are still honest people in the world. That means a lot." Lena didn't know what to say. She just smiled and nodded. "Take care of yourself, okay? And maybe next time let the bank call wait until you're home." He grinned faintly. "Noted." As he walked toward the door, he turned back once. "Thank you, miss. Truly." "You're welcome," she said softly, watching him leave. The night went on, and soon the incident slipped into the rhythm of her shift. Orders, laughter, the soft hum of life. But part of her kept replaying that look on his face, that mix of fear and gratitude. She didn't know why it stuck with her, but it did. When she clocked out near midnight, she stepped outside into the cool air, pulling her jacket tighter around her. The street was quiet, a few cars passing by, neon lights reflecting off puddles on the ground. She thought about her own life, how she was barely getting by, saving every extra dollar for her dream of one day owning a small coffee shop. A simple place with music, warm lights, and people like Harold who needed a spot to feel seen. She smiled at the thought, shaking her head. Dreams felt far away most days, but tonight, something about that encounter gave her hope. Maybe because it reminded her that small moments mattered. That kindness, even in a noisy bar on a random night, could change something. She didn't know it yet. But the man she helped that evening would come back into her life in a way she could never imagine. The next few days at the bar went by as usual. People came and went. Faces Lena had seen 100 times before, each carrying their own stories. But in the middle of that noise and movement, she kept thinking about the old man she had helped. Harold. She wasn't even sure why. Maybe because he had looked so lost that night, or maybe because it felt good to have done something meaningful for someone. It was Thursday evening when she saw him again. The door opened and there he was, the same neat gray coat and the same calm smile. This time he didn't look uncertain. He walked in with confidence, like someone coming back to a place that had made him feel safe. "Good evening," Lena said with a smile as he took the same seat at the bar. "Glad to see you again," he nodded. "I thought I'd stop by and thank you properly. I owe you more than I can say." "You don't owe me anything," she said, pouring him a glass of water first. "You were just in a bad situation. Anyone would have helped." He gave a small laugh. "Not everyone would. Most people mind their own business these days." Lena shrugged. "Maybe, but I talk for a living. Hard to mind my business all the time." He chuckled, and it made her feel warm inside. She poured his usual drink, and they started talking again. At first it was just small talk. The weather, how the bar always seemed busier on rainy nights, how city life could be both exciting and lonely at the same time. But slowly the conversation turned personal. He told her about his late wife, June, how they had been married for over 40 years, how she had loved to dance in the kitchen and hum old songs while she cooked. When he spoke of her, his voice softened, and there was a look in his eyes that told Lena she had been his whole world. "She passed about 6 years ago," he said quietly, swirling the ice in his glass. "The house hasn't felt the same since. I still talk to her sometimes. Out loud, you know, just to feel like she's still there." Lena didn't interrupt. She just listened. She had learned that people came to bars not just for drinks, but for someone to listen without judging. "I think that's nice," she said softly. "Sometimes saying things out loud helps you remember that love doesn't disappear. It just changes shape." He looked up at her a little surprised. "That's quite a wise thing to say for someone your age," she smiled. "Life teaches fast when you're trying to survive." He nodded thoughtfully. "I can see that." As the days turned into weeks, Harold became a regular. Every few evenings he would show up around the same time, always sitting in the same seat at the bar. Sometimes he stayed for just one drink, other times for hours. He never caused trouble, never drank too much. He just talked about books, travel, his past business, and sometimes about the loneliness of getting old. In return, Lena found herself opening up too. She told him about her brother, who was studying hard to become a nurse, about her mother who lived in another town and called every Sunday without fail. She even told him about her dream, to one day open her own little coffee shop somewhere quiet where people could sit and read or talk for hours. A coffee shop? Harold asked one night, genuinely interested. Why that? Lena smiled, drying a glass. Because coffee feels like comfort to me. When I was younger, my mom used to brew it early in the morning. The smell always made the house feel alive. I want to create that kind of feeling for other people, a place that feels safe and calm. That's a lovely dream, Harold said, nodding. Have you started planning for it? She laughed lightly. Planning, yes. Affording, not so much. Rent, equipment, licenses, it's all a bit out of reach right now. But I save what I can. He didn't say anything for a moment, just looked at her with quiet thoughtfulness. Keep saving, he said finally. Sometimes dreams take longer than we expect, but they have a way of waiting for us if we don't give up. She smiled at that. I'll try to remember that. Their conversations became the highlight of her shifts. Other customers would come and go, but when Harold sat at the counter, time seemed to slow down. There was something grounding about his presence, his old-fashioned manners, the way he listened carefully, the small stories he shared about a world that seemed so different from hers. One night he brought a small box with him. He placed it on the counter before ordering his drink. What's that? Lena asked, curious. Just something I wanted to show you, he said with a faint smile. Inside was an old pocket watch, silver with tiny engravings on the sides. This belonged to my father. He gave it to me when I started my first business. Said it would remind me that time is the most valuable thing we have. It's beautiful, Lena said, holding it carefully. Still works too? He nodded. Oh yes. I wind it every morning. Habit. She handed it back and he smiled as he tucked it into his pocket. I suppose I wanted to share it because you remind me a bit of myself when I was young. Trying to make something of my life, not knowing if I'd make it, but still believing I could. Lena laughed softly. I'll take that as a compliment. It is, he said with warmth. You have that spark. People like that don't go unnoticed. As weeks turned into months, the two of them developed a quiet friendship. He started bringing her small gifts sometimes. A book he thought she'd enjoy, a jar of homemade jam from a neighbor, once even a scarf because he said the nights were getting colder. Lena always tried to refuse, but he would just wave his hand and say, "Don't argue. It makes me feel useful." They talked about everything, family, mistakes, memories, and little things that made life feel worth it. Sometimes he would sit in silence and she didn't push him to talk. Just having him there felt enough. Other people at the bar began to notice too. Some regulars would joke that Harold was her favorite customer. She didn't deny it. There was something special about their connection, something honest, built from a moment of trust that started with a simple act of kindness. One evening, as she was closing up, Harold stayed until the end of her shift. The place was quiet except for the faint sound of rain outside. You ever get tired of it? He asked suddenly. The bar? She asked. He nodded. She thought for a moment. Sometimes. But it pays the bills. And I like talking to people. Some nights it even feels like I'm learning something new about life. He smiled faintly. That's a good way to look at it. Most people forget that even ordinary days can teach us something. When she turned off the last light, he waited by the door to walk her out. You shouldn't walk alone this late, he said, almost like a father would. She smiled and told him she'd be fine, but she appreciated the thought. Before leaving, he said something that stayed with her. Kindness has a funny way of coming back around. Maybe not right away, but when you least expect it. She didn't think much of it at the time. She just waved him off with a smile and headed home through the rain, her shoes splashing in puddles. Over the next few weeks, their talks continued, each one deepening the quiet bond they shared. Harold told her about his childhood during the war, how he'd once dreamed of being a writer and how he'd learned that success means little without someone to share it with. Lena listened with genuine interest, feeling like she was learning about more than just him. She was learning about life itself. And through it all, he listened to her too. When she talked about her worries, her hopes, her exhaustion, he never dismissed them. He always had a gentle answer, or sometimes just silence and a nod that made her feel understood. In a way, Harold had become something rare in her life, a friend who saw her not as a server, not as someone struggling to make ends meet, but as a person worth knowing. One night, as she was wiping down the bar after closing, she looked at the empty seat where he usually sat. She smiled to herself. feeling thankful for how a random evening months ago had turned into something good. She didn't know it yet, but soon everything would change again. Harold's visits would suddenly stop, and the empty seat at the bar would stay empty for a long time. But for now, in that quiet moment, she just felt grateful. For the old man who came in one night by chance and stayed long enough to remind her what kindness and connection could mean. The days turned into weeks and the bar kept its usual rhythm. The laughter, the noise, the music, all blending into the same familiar hum. But something felt missing to Lena. Every time she looked toward the door, she half expected to see Harold walk in, tipping his hat and taking his usual seat. But he didn't come. Not that night, not the next, not even the week after. At first, she told herself he might just be busy. Maybe he was traveling or visiting family. But as days stretched into weeks, worry started to grow inside her. It wasn't like him. He had become a part of her daily life, a quiet presence she had come to look forward to. And now nothing. No call, no message, no sign at all. She didn't even know how to reach him. They had never exchanged numbers. Their friendship had been something simple, built within the walls of that bar over small talk and shared silences. It hurt to realize that she didn't really know much about him beyond those moments. One slow Tuesday night, she stood behind the counter, wiping glasses that didn't need cleaning. The other bartender, an older man named Jeff, noticed her staring at the door again. "You're waiting for someone?" he asked. She hesitated. "Just a regular. An older gentleman who used to come by a lot." Jeff smirked. "Ah, the one who always sits at the corner seat? The polite guy in the suit?" Lena nodded. "Yeah, him. Haven't seen him in a while," Jeff said, frowning. "Hope he's okay. Seemed like one of the good ones." "Yeah," she said softly. "He really was." The night dragged on, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. When she got home, she sat on her small couch and stared at her phone. She didn't even know where to begin looking for him. All she knew was his name, Harold Hargrove. Maybe, she thought, she could search online. Maybe there would be some clue. After a few minutes of searching, she found something, a small mention in a local newspaper archive. An article about a retired businessman named Harold Hargrove, who had donated to a local library years ago. There was a picture too, a little younger, but it was definitely him. The caption said he lived on the east side of the city. That was something. The next day, before her shift, Lena took a bus across town. The neighborhood was quiet, full of old brick houses and large trees. She walked down the street slowly, looking for his address. When she finally found it, she hesitated at the gate. It was a small, well-kept home with a white fence and a few potted plants near the porch. But the curtains were drawn, and the mailbox looked untouched. She rang the bell once. No answer. Twice, still nothing. Then she noticed a neighbor, an older woman watering her garden across the street. "Excuse me," Lena called softly. "Do you know if Mr. Hargrove is home?" The woman turned, wiping her hands on her apron. "Oh, Harold? Haven't seen him around for a few weeks now. He wasn't feeling well last time we spoke. Think his nephew came by to take him somewhere. Maybe a care facility or something." Lena felt a pang of worry. "Do you know where?" The woman shook her head. "Sorry, dear. All I know is he mentioned something about needing rest and treatment." "He's a kind man. I hope he's all right." Lena thanked her and walked away, her chest heavy. She stood at the bus stop, staring at the gray sky, trying not to think the worst. Maybe he was fine. Maybe he just needed time. Still, the thought of him alone somewhere sick made her heart ache. Back at the bar that night, everything felt different. She kept glancing at his empty seat, the one near the end of the counter. It felt wrong, like the space itself missed him. She even caught herself talking to that empty spot once, mumbling a comment she knew he would have laughed at. It made her smile for a second. Then her eyes filled with tears. Weeks passed and the ache turned into a quiet sadness that never quite went away. Life went on as it always does. She worked, saved money, smiled for customers, and tried to focus on her dream. But deep down she missed the calm he brought into her chaotic little world. One night a man came in who reminded her of him. The same kind of suit, the same careful way of speaking. For a moment her heart jumped. But when she looked closer, it wasn't him. She laughed at herself, shaking her head. Maybe she was foolish for caring this much about someone she barely knew, but she couldn't help it. He had left a mark. Months went by. Seasons changed. The city went from bright summer evenings to the golden chill of autumn. The bar stayed the same, but Lena had changed. She found herself becoming more patient with people, more observant, kinder. Maybe it was something Harold had taught her without meaning to. She still thought about their talks sometimes, his quiet wisdom, his stories about love and loss, his gentle reminder that kindness comes back in ways we don't expect. She didn't know if she'd ever see him again, but she held on to those words. They made her feel grounded when life got hard. One rainy night, close to closing time, Lena stood at the window watching the streetlights reflect off wet pavement. The sound of rain against the glass made her feel strangely peaceful. She thought of Harold again, how he'd probably have said something poetic about nights like this. She smiled softly, whispering under her breath, "Hope you're doing okay, old man." A few customers remained, chatting quietly, but she wasn't really paying attention. Her mind was somewhere else, back in those simple moments when he'd sit at the bar and talk about life. She wondered if he ever thought of her, too. When she got home that night, she sat by her small kitchen table, sipping tea. The apartment was silent except for the soft hum of the fridge. She looked around at the walls, decorated with old postcards and photos, and for a brief second, she wished she could tell him about everything that had happened, how she was still saving, still dreaming, still trying, but there was no one to tell. As winter arrived, the city grew quieter. People hurried in and out of the bar, trying to escape the cold. Lena worked long shifts, often smiling through exhaustion. Sometimes she'd find herself polishing the counter near his usual spot, as if keeping it ready for him just in case. One night, Jeff noticed her doing it and chuckled. "Still keeping his seat warm, huh?" Lena smiled faintly. "Guess so. Feels wrong to let anyone else sit there." He gave her a knowing look. "You miss him," she nodded. "Yeah, I do." "Well," Jeff said kindly, "good people don't come around often. When they do, you remember them." His words stayed with her long after the shift ended. She realized that even if Harold never came back, the way he had treated her, the kindness, the encouragement, the gentle faith in her dreams, had already changed her. Maybe that was the point. Maybe some people come into your life just long enough to leave you better than they found you. Still, sometimes when she walked home late at night, she'd catch herself glancing at passing cars or at old men crossing the street, hoping for a familiar face. But he never appeared. Spring came again and the city brightened. The bar got busier, the music louder, the nights longer. Lena had grown more confident now, more focused. She even started taking small business classes online, saving every extra bit she could. In her heart, she carried that quiet promise to one day make her dream real. But every now and then, when she wiped down the bar and looked at the door, she still felt that flicker of hope. Maybe one day he'd walk in again, smiling that same gentle smile, asking for his usual drink like no time had passed at all. She didn't know it yet, but life had a way of circling back. People disappear, yes, but sometimes they return when you least expect them, when you've stopped waiting and started living. And when they do, everything changes in ways you could never imagine. For now, though, she just kept working, kept dreaming, and kept that quiet corner of the bar ready, just in case Harold ever found his way back home. It had been almost a year since Lena last saw Harold. Life had moved forward as it always did. The bar had changed a little, new faces, new music, and new stories walking in every night. Lena had gotten better at her job, more confident with people, more patient with the chaos that came with serving drinks until late at night. But no matter how busy the place got, she never stopped glancing toward that corner seat, the one that used to belong to him. Sometimes, when the night was slow, she would find herself lost in thought, wondering where he was. Maybe he was living quietly somewhere near the sea. Maybe he had moved closer to family, or maybe she didn't let herself finish that thought. It hurt too much to imagine the worst. Then one ordinary Friday evening, something unexpected happened. The bar was buzzing with life, the hum of laughter and music filling the air. Lena was serving drinks when the door opened and a familiar voice said, "I hope my usual seat is still available." She froze for a second, her heart racing. When she turned, there he was, Harold, standing by the door, smiling just like he used to. But he looked different, healthier, stronger, and dressed even more neatly than before. His eyes sparkled with the same warmth she remembered. "Harold," she said, the joy in her voice surprising even herself. She rushed from behind the counter, almost bumping into a table. You're here. It's been so long. He laughed softly. It has. Far too long, I'd say. She motioned him to sit at his old spot. You scared me, you know. I thought something bad happened. He nodded slowly as he sat down. Something did, actually. I wasn't well for a while. My nephew took me to a recovery place out of town. It took some time, but I got better. Lena felt a rush of relief. I'm so glad to hear that. I was really worried. He looked touched. You thought about me? Of course I did, she said. You kind of disappeared without a word. He smiled, his eyes soft. I'm sorry for that. I wanted to reach out, but honestly, I didn't think you'd even remember me after all this time. Are you kidding? Lena said, laughing lightly. You're hard to forget. For a while, they just talked, catching up like old friends who had lost time. He told her about his stay in the countryside, how the air was cleaner, how he took walks every morning, and how being away from the noise of the city gave him time to think. He even joked about learning to bake bread, but admitted he wasn't very good at it. Lena listened, smiling the whole time. It felt like no time had passed at all. He was still the same, kind, calm, and wise. The bar was busier than ever. But for her, the world seemed to shrink down to that small space where they sat talking. After a while, Harold reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an envelope. He placed it gently on the counter. What's that? Lena asked curiously. Something I've been meaning to give you, he said. But before I do, I need to say something first. Lena frowned slightly. Okay, he took a deep breath. When I was in recovery, I had a lot of time to think. About my life, my choices, and what really mattered. I realized that money, success, all those things I worked for, they don't mean much without purpose. But kindness, that's something you never forget. And that night when you helped me, you gave me more than you realize. Lena felt her throat tighten. Harold, you don't have to say that, he held up a hand. Let me finish. You saved me that night, not just from losing money, but from losing faith in people. And you didn't do it because you wanted anything in return. You just cared. That kind of goodness is rare. It made me want to be better. He slid the envelope across the counter. Open it. Her hands shook a little as she picked it up and unfolded the flap. Inside was a set of official-looking documents and a small silver key. Harold, what is this? She asked, confused. It's a partnership agreement, he said, smiling. I've been working on it for months. I'm investing in your coffee shop dream. Her eyes widened. What? Don't know, Harold, I can't. You can, he interrupted gently. And you will. You've talked about that dream so many times. I could see how much it meant to you. You deserve the chance to make it real. But this is too much, she said, shaking her head. You don't owe me anything. You already... I know, he said softly. But this isn't about owing you. It's about giving back. You believed in doing good without expecting anything. Let me do the same. Lena stared at the papers, speechless. I don't know what to say. Say yes, he said simply. Say you'll make something beautiful with it. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them away quickly. Harold, are you sure? This is a huge deal, he nodded. I'm sure. I've already talked to my lawyer. Everything is set up. You'll have full creative control and I'll just be a silent investor. I don't want profits or anything back. I just want to see you succeed. She covered her mouth, overwhelmed. I don't even know how to thank you. He smiled warmly. You already did a long time ago. For a while, neither of them spoke. The noise of the bar faded into the background. Lena just stared at the papers, realizing her life was about to change in a way she had never imagined. When she finally looked up, she said, I'll do it. I'll make it happen. And I promise it'll be something you'll be proud of. I know you will, he said. That's why I chose you. After that night, everything felt different. Harold started visiting the bar more often again, though now their talks were full of plans. He helped her find a location for the coffee shop, talked her through financial details, and introduced her to people who could help with design and permits. Lena couldn't believe how much he knew about running a business. It was as if all his years of experience were now being poured into helping her dream come alive. Some nights, they'd sit at the bar with papers spread out between them, sketching ideas on napkins and laughing at how messy their notes looked. Other nights, they'd just talk about life like they always used to. You really think people will come? She asked one evening, looking at the early floor plan. They'll come, he said confidently, not just because of the coffee, but because of you. People can feel when something is made with heart. His faith in her gave her strength. For the first time in years, she felt like she was finally stepping toward the life she had always dreamed of. A few months later, the construction started. Harold came by often to check the progress, walking with a cane now but still full of energy. He'd joke with the workers, share old stories, and always end with, "Make it perfect, she deserves the best." Watching him, Lena often felt her heart swell with gratitude. She had never imagined that a chance encounter, a night that began with a scam, would turn into something that would completely reshape her life. One afternoon, as they stood outside the nearly finished shop, Harold looked around proudly. "You see that?" he said, pointing at the freshly painted sign that read the Hargrove Cafe. "Has a nice ring to it, doesn't it?" Lena smiled, her eyes shining. "You didn't have to name it after you." "I didn't," he said, grinning. "You did," she laughed softly. "Well, it felt right. None of this would have happened without you." He looked at her kindly. "Maybe not. But remember, it all started with you noticing someone who needed help. You did that. You set all of this in motion." As the sun began to set, painting the sky with orange and pink light, Lena felt a deep sense of peace. She looked at Harold and said, "You changed my life, you know that?" He smiled, his eyes crinkling. "You changed mine first." And for the first time in a long time, both of them felt like everything had come full circle. What began as a moment of chance and kindness had become something lasting, proof that sometimes the simplest gestures can ripple into something extraordinary. The morning sun spilled softly through the front windows of the new cafe, painting the wooden tables with a warm golden glow. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, blending with the faint sweetness of pastries that had just come out of the oven. Lena stood behind the counter, staring at everything she had built. It didn't feel real yet. The walls were decorated with photos of the city, art from local painters, and little handwritten notes from friends wishing her luck. The sign outside read, "The Hargrove Cafe," shining in elegant letters. Today was the grand opening. After months of hard work, sleepless nights, and endless planning, her dream was finally alive. The thought made her heart race with both excitement and nerves. She checked every little detail again. The chairs were straight, the menu was neat, the music was soft and welcoming. She wanted it to be perfect. When she looked up, she saw Harold standing outside the door. He wore a light gray suit and a kind smile that could melt anyone's heart. She rushed to open the door for him. "You're early," she said with a grin. "Of course I am," he replied. "I wouldn't miss this for the world." He stepped inside slowly, looking around the cafe with wonder in his eyes. "It's beautiful," he said. "Better than I imagined." "It's all thanks to you," she said softly. He shook his head. "No, my dear. This is all you. I just gave a little push. You did everything else." They shared a smile, one that said more than words ever could. A few minutes later, the first customers began to arrive. Neighbors, friends, and people from the community who had seen the new place being built. Some came out of curiosity, others because they had heard about the story behind the name. Lena greeted each person with a warm smile and a free sample of coffee. The room soon filled with laughter and chatter. People complimented the design, the aroma, the friendly atmosphere. It felt alive, just as she had imagined. Harold sat near the window, watching everything quietly. Every now and then, someone would recognize him and walk over to thank him for helping make the cafe possible. He would just smile modestly and say, "Oh, I just believed in the right person." As the day went on, Lena barely had a moment to breathe. The orders kept coming, the tables stayed full, and every time she glanced at Harold, he was smiling proudly. By the afternoon, the place had completely sold out of pastries. She stood behind the counter, wiping her hands, exhausted but glowing with happiness. When the rush finally slowed down, she poured 2 cups of coffee and brought one to Harold's table. "I think it's safe to say the first day was a success," she said. "A roaring one," he replied, lifting his cup. "To new beginnings." "To new beginnings," she echoed, clinking her cup gently against his. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the world outside. The late afternoon light bathed the street in gold. Lena could feel the tiredness in her feet, but it was the good kind of tired, the kind that came from doing something you loved. "You know," Harold said after a pause, "when I first met you, I never imagined we'd end up here. Life is funny that way. One small moment can change everything. I was just doing what anyone should do, she said quietly. He smiled knowingly. Maybe, but most people don't. You chose kindness when you didn't have to. That made all the difference. Lena looked down at her cup, feeling a lump rise in her throat. You changed my life, Harold, I mean it. If it weren't for you, I'd still be stuck behind that bar dreaming instead of doing. He shook his head gently. You had it in you all along. I just helped you see it. The bell above the door jingled as another group of customers came in. Lena excused herself, rushing to take their orders, but she kept glancing at Harold. He seemed peaceful, almost nostalgic as he sipped his coffee and watched her work. Later that evening, when the last customer had left, Lena locked the front door and turned off most of the lights, leaving only the warm glow from the hanging lamps. The cafe was quiet now, but it still felt full of energy. She sat across from Harold again, her face glowing from a mix of pride and exhaustion. You know what I was thinking? She asked. What's that? How strange it is that life works the way it does. If I hadn't been working that night, if you hadn't walked into the bar, none of this would have happened. He chuckled softly. Life has a funny way of putting people in the right place at the right time. She nodded. Do you ever think about how things could have gone differently? Sometimes, he admitted. But then I remember that everything happens for a reason. Even the bad days lead us somewhere better if we let them. There was a peaceful silence between them. The hum of the refrigerator and the faint sound of cars outside were the only noises left. Lena took a deep breath and smiled. Thank you, she said softly. For everything. For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. He looked at her with gentle eyes. You don't have to thank me. Just promise me you'll keep going. Keep building. Keep spreading that kindness of yours. The world needs more of it. I promise, she said firmly. As the evening turned into night, Harold stood to leave. Lena walked him to the door. The streetlights were on, casting a soft glow on the sidewalk. Will you come by again tomorrow? She asked. He smiled. You won't be able to keep me away. She laughed and hugged him gently. He patted her shoulder, then stepped out into the cool night air. Lena watched as he walked slowly down the street, his figure fading into the distance. Something about the moment felt heavy yet peaceful, like a chapter closing and a new one beginning. The next morning, she came in early again. The cafe felt different now, alive, hopeful, full of meaning. Customers came and went all day, leaving with smiles on their faces. The little community around the cafe grew quickly. People said they could feel the love in the place, the warmth in every detail. Weeks passed, then months. Harold still visited often, though sometimes just to sit quietly by the window with his coffee. He watched people laugh, talk, and build memories there. He said that seeing the place busy made him feel younger, like life still had so much to give. One day, Lena walked over to his table and said, You know, I've been thinking about expanding. Maybe a small bakery corner or live music nights. He smiled, eyes twinkling. That's the spirit. Always dream bigger. They laughed, and once again it felt like time slowed down around them. They didn't need many words. The connection between them said it all. Two people who had met by chance, now bound by kindness and purpose. On the cafe's one-year anniversary, Lena hosted a small celebration. There were balloons, live acoustic music, and free coffee for everyone. She gave a short speech, her voice trembling with emotion. A year ago, I didn't think this was possible, but someone believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself. This place exists because of kindness, because of one person's trust and generosity. And I hope that everyone who walks through these doors feels a little bit of that same kindness. The crowd clapped, and Lena looked over to where Harold sat, smiling proudly. When their eyes met, she saw that familiar warmth that had first made her trust him. Later that night, when the celebration ended, Harold walked up to her and said quietly, You did it. You really did it, she smiled through happy tears. We did it, he chuckled. Maybe, but it was your heart that made it happen. They stood there for a moment, surrounded by the soft glow of lights and the faint smell of coffee in the air. It was one of those moments that didn't need grand words, just quiet gratitude. As the night ended, Lena turned off the lights one by one. The cafe felt warm and full of love. She looked out the window at the empty street, thinking about how one act of kindness had changed everything, how a chance meeting had turned into a friendship that shaped her life. And as she locked the door for the night, she whispered to herself, Thank you, Harold. From that day on, the Hargrove Cafe became more than just a place for coffee. It became a story, a reminder that one small act of goodness could ripple through time, touching lives in ways no one could ever predict. And every morning as the sunlight poured through the windows, Lena knew that kindness once given always finds its way back.